Hi, and welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. And I am so glad to be here and be your host today. We're talking about making better decisions. And you guys all know, after you listen to the show, even just a few times, you know where my sweet spots are and where I geek out. This happens to be one of them. Plus, David Amerland is here with us, which means I get to have this double geek out session because he's fun to talk to. He always shares things that are down to earth. And he will tie things together we may not realize actually go together to give us a new way to think about the way we're already doing things and the way we're looking to improve and what we might be able to do to get there faster, better, more seamlessly in the role that we find ourselves in and where we're putting our attention and focus. Right after this, you get to meet David Amerland. First, I'd like to introduce him to you. He is an author, speaker, analyst, and strategic advisor. He charts connections between data mining, search, social media, marketing, and branding, and most important, the human factor and how we fit into the roles of what we can measure. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
Yeah, you heard it. It's sunny and snowy here. It's sunny where David is. There are so many places we could start. Right before we started the show, we were talking about the difference between core competency and soft skill, because in the grand scheme of things, they mean the same thing, but the perception that we have about the words that are used are very different. And that's a really good place to start in terms of we're going to be using the word soft skill today. And talk to us a little bit about that and why you use the term soft skill over core competency.
The moment we start talking about competency, we sort of introduce the concept or the idea that it's something that can be measured. And the moment it can be measured, it can go on a leaderboard, and then suddenly we have a person who's better than another person, or a person who can do something or can't do something. And really, this is not what core competencies are at all. And the moment we say that they're soft skills, we begin to understand there's something which are intrinsic to the person, and they have been developed over time, and they're part of their identity, infused in who they are. And that's what actually buying into. Ultimately, whether we are hiring somebody for a job or actually connecting somebody for something specific, we are looking to connect with that person. If that connection isn't there, if we can't actually gel with that person, if we can't bring out the best in them and they the best in us, whatever else we have, whatever skills we have in terms of knowledge and capability and whatever we have on a piece of paper that says we can do something is irrelevant. And we all know that. We know that there are dream teams within quotation marks that get nowhere, whether it's the sports field or business arena or even the battlefield. When it comes to things like the army, they've learned this thing the hard way. And they've learned to basically make sure that the human factor gels in the best possible way to create a seamless whole. It's something we're learning in business every day. It's something which we're learning on social technical platforms like Facebook and G+, and even Twitter these days.
It's interesting that you bring up the military. We all have our own preconceived notions about what it means to be part of the military and aspire to be part of an elite team. We've all got those. So instead of talking about that, where I want to go is how long have militaries been around? A whole lot longer than businesses. And how long have businesses in general been around compared to the military we have today? A whole lot less. They already know what their mistakes are. They have a history that a lot of businesses don't. Even the longest of the longevity that we might see in business. How can we, not having that history in our organizations, use and learn from other people when we don't get that directly from our own experience?
It comes down to solving something which we have always introspectively asked ourselves. How do we learn? How do we learn as individuals? And how do we learn as a business? How do we learn as an organization? And usually the answer to that is you either have some kind of archive, you have some kind of personal knowledge, you have some kind of education, and this is part of your learning process. And this brings us exactly to the dichotomy between hard and soft skills. Because when we have soft skills, we usually have a body of knowledge, which is traditionally called traditions. And those traditions are designed to create frames of mind, which then trigger specific correlations in the way we sort of interact and engage, and they bring out specific outcomes. And I'll give you an example now. You meet somebody traditionally, what do? You shake their hand, right? Because why do we need to shake the hand? We make eye contact, we can exchange business cards. Yeah, why do we need to shake hand? And traditionally, if we go back in history, that was an idea that, you shook somebody's hand, first of all, to make the human touch, human contact, person to person, you're real and so am I, and I'm allowing you to touch me and I'm touching you back. And also to show that we come in peace, we hide no weapons, and we're not in the proximity to use them. So we immediately establish trust. So we take this traditional approach and we apply it in a modern day setting in the 21st century. And let's say we don't do it. I meet you, you meet me, you put out your hand and I refuse to shake it. Whatever happens afterwards, it's been colored by that little lack of tradition, or that misstep, if you like, which would mark me different from you suddenly, and you would mistrust me, even though we could see eye to eye in practically everything else. By bringing this in, suddenly you realize, and we realize, that traditions are a body of knowledge, a body of practices, which have a very specific outcome in terms of the way we interact as people. And that's how it is in terms of how we learn. So when it comes to organizations now, you say, well, how do we actually apply this? Do we have traditions? Do we keep those traditions? And this is particularly pertinent today, when most organizations used to count their skill level and their knowledge level by the number of MBAs they had in their staff. These are the hard skills. We've got MBAs and have been through the business school and know specific things, and know bring a merger together, or perhaps launch a new product, or put together a marketing campaign. But you say, well, traditionally, what do you do? What does any business do? Well, a business has to do business with people, and those people must trust it. And if these two things don't happen, well, however brilliant you think your staff is, however brilliant your business plan, or however great your product, you're doomed to fail. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that there are a great number of businesses in the West that have very short lifespans. For a different book, a few years back, I was doing some research, and I saw that in the Western world, the average lifespan of a business is 6 years, sometimes to 10. So between 6 and 10 years, something like 75% of new startups fail. And that's staggering. When we consider that there are outliers like Beretta, who used to make swords, and they were active in the Middle Ages, and they're like 350 years old. And there are some outliers in Japan that they're 1,000 years old. So you think, well, how can you have 1,000-year-old business? How, they must have evolved, right?
Yeah.
Well, they have, but the basic principle, the fundamental, is that they are people doing business with people. And if that connection is real, as their audience evolves, so does the business. I mean, Beretta no longer manufacture swords, right? They manufacture guns these days.
Okay.
But
yeah.
when you think about this is exactly the case. And so many businesses don't have that connection. A lot of brilliant energy, a lot of skill into creating the perfect marketing plan, the perfect product spec sheet, the perfect website, if you like. And we do all these things thinking, this is what we broadcast out there to people. And you say, well, who are these people? And you bring up the tragic and classic marketing persona, which doesn't exist because it's some kind of ideal customer you put together in your head. And then in response, you say, well, no, maybe we need to advertise more aggressively. Maybe we need to price our products better. No. What you need to do is actually connect with people and say, hey, you have a need and we have a solution. And this is how we can help you. And the moment you have that kind of dialogue, everything changes. And these are the soft skills. These are the things which you can't really learn. These are the things which, as a company, you need to have a tradition of actually doing. The best companies these days are the ones which appear very human. Classic example of a company that was active in the 80s and 70s is Virgin. Mm-hmm. And why do we like Virgin, which is a global conglomerate with finger in every pie, from telephony to space exploration? Well, because of Richard Branson, because he's very human, right? He's the face, the public face of that company, and he humanizes it. And that's exactly the approach that most businesses lack. They don't have a human face. They have a logo and have a building. And we can't really relate to that.
Whether how small or how big, we've got companies that are fearful of having a public face because of how it might be perceived. The perception of their company may differ. And if they put themselves out there, will they be thought of as the only person in the company? And It's an interesting dichotomy and process that we have to go through as business leaders. And when we are making a shift and thinking about, do we want to go start our own business or not? How are we going to show up? Because what may have been modeled to us in the business that we're in with the experience that we have may be wrong for actually doing business today somehow. And why do we tend to want to leave these great businesses and the stability and whatever to go out on our own? Is because we feel they're doing it wrong. But then what do? We go do exactly what they did because it's what we know.
I think you mentioned the key word there, of course, it's fear. Because the moment we leave the relative stability and security of an established business and we set out on our own, we then crave to have the same security and stability. So instinctively, and without thinking very deeply, what do? We emulate the failed, within quotation marks, model we left behind, and we sort of tend to perpetuate it. These are the things which lead us to create similar models to very similar outcomes, because unless we change our behavior, unless we change the way we do things, we shouldn't really expect to have any kind of different outcome. You get somebody who's a small startup suddenly competing within the broader market space of the larger company that left, and they're saying, oh, we don't have deep pockets, we don't have manpower, but hey, aren't you different? You're the person, you have the passion. You left for a very specific reason, as you mentioned. Where is that reason? How do we find out? How do you project this? How do you connect? How do you tell me, hey, we can do things differently and do them better, and let me know and make an educated decision as a consumer about what you do?
It's all about managing perspectives of us and of our companies. This concept of managing perspectives keeps coming up. And when we need to manage our perspectives that others have of us more, and how do we show up, and what do we show them, whether or not we think it's the right thing. When we leave out of fear, yet we seek stability, maybe within the company that we're in now, and we're looking at our role and we're thinking about advancement, or we're at an executive level and we're thinking about exploring a new market, or figuring out, oh, there's some activity over here. Do I have a new market to go into to lead us toward? Managing these perceptions are, how are other people doing it first? How have they already made the connection? And do we have that same set of soft skills and approach and ability to make the connection to build trust to go that direction? Whether that's to advance our career, open a new market, make a connection into a company that we want to serve as a group because it would be great for our own our own company's growth. What are your thoughts around this concept of managing perceptions?
I think first of all, you mentioned the word perception, and I think that's critical, because if we analyze what perception is, it's essentially our own interpretation of the facts which we have in front of us, which are experientially proven. If you say to me, look outside my window, and I look outside your window, and you're looking at snow because you're feeling cold, and I'm looking at the reflection of snow, I'm thinking, God, it's a really bright day. Because, if I was in the UK right now, I'd be thinking, that's what I lack, brightness. So we look at the same thing, but my perception will be different to yours because our context will be different. I'm on this side of the screen, so I'm looking at the brightness. You're on that side of the screen, you're feeling the cold. You're thinking, God, this is really dreary and cold and wintry. And you're wishing for summer. And that perception is really, really difficult to harness and manage unless, of course, you said, hey, look at the brightness outside my window. Then you sort of guide me, and we're on the same page. When we tackle things this way, and this is where a lot of the research I did for the sniper mind comes into its own, when we feel the fear of the unknown, there's two ways to go about it. The first one is to actually feel the fear and then you respond to it. And what do? You hunker down, you close down the hatches, you reduce your exposure, you try to manage the risk. This is really cool. Risk management assessment, huge industry on this. And you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be very careful and very staid and very boring, and I'm going to be doing what everybody else is doing because that clearly works. And it doesn't. It doesn't really get us where we need to get to. So what's the other thing? The other thing is to actually say, hey, I feel fear, healthy response, because there's uncertainty in what I'm going to do. Whether it's a career decision I'm going to make in a big company, whether it's a marketing decision I'm going to make as a startup, whether it's a new product I'm going to launch as an established business. That fear is perfectly natural because when all's said and done, you've done everything that you should do, you still don't know if it's going to be successful. So the moment you realize you're afraid, then you've got to ask yourself, okay, why am I afraid? You're afraid because you don't know if you're going to succeed. And then you say, okay, what's most important to me? Clearly, we all need to succeed because we make money out of it and we all need to make a living, but that's not the most important thing. I mean, there are many ways to do this, and if we fail at one thing, we'll go on to another. So really the most important thing is to actually analyze why you're doing it. What is so important about this career move? What is so important about this product launch? Why did you set up your own business? What is your real motivation? If you say, well, my motivation is to make money, well, most likely you're going to fail because we're all on that same boat. But what makes us different in that crowd is why we're on that boat. We're on the boat because we have a vision. That vision is unique. We have a passion. That passion is unique. We have an idea which nobody else has had. And that's what makes us special. And unless you can actually become special, then you can't make the connection and you can't differentiate yourself. You can't get people to buy into what you're doing, and you'll fail. Awareness without fear. These are the techniques the military use, top-level athletes use, top-level businessmen use. They all feel the same fear. What is different is the fact that they acknowledge it, they own it, they say, okay, this is perfectly natural. Why am I feeling this? Why am I here? And when your why is greater than the fear you feel, then you can begin to move forward.
And let's say we're paralyzed. I'm going to just stick right here because there are a lot of people who are like, but I think my why is here and I'm just not moving, which means the why is not clear yet, first of all.
Yes, absolutely.
So what can we do about it? We take some action. This is where it's like, let's see. It goes back to what you were saying about experiential, and I would add the word experimental. And so if we're doing something and we're projecting out and somebody else's perception of what we're doing is not in line with what we think, there will be some dissonance there. And our goal in every action that we take to watch the situation around us and how we're showing up in this self-awareness really is to figure out, what do we do that creates coherence? What are we doing to make those connections? Because it's those eensy, teensy, weensy bits of coherence that people will start remembering. You did that. Oh, I might want your opinion on this. Hey, I hear that you agree and there's more to get us toward this success. I'm going to seek you out next time. And those are the types of things that are soft skills. When you talk about being special, that's what I think about. You know, when I'm seeing something I don't like the result of, where do I go? Right here. Right here. First, front and center. Jess, not sure what you're doing, but what you're trying to do is not getting you the result you want.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, this is a perfect example. You're right. Once we begin to overcome our fear, then the question is, and everybody has it at some point, are we a fraud? Can we do this? Are we actually delivering? And this is how we get past it. We get past it by a very simple exercise, a very simple skill, and that's exercising empathy. And you say, oh, that's really easy to do. How do I actually do that? Well, empathy is taking yourself out of yourself and actually thinking and walking in the other person's shoes. Whether that other person is a business acquaintance or a potential customer or somebody who's a competitor or somebody you're actually having an argument with. And this is really difficult to do because we have told ourselves that in order to succeed in anything, we need focus, and we need to feel important, and we need to hunker down and drive our vision and passion and hone it into a really sharp edge. And all this spells ego in massive 6-foot-high letters. And the thing is, the moment we put ego out there, it's really big and it's really fragile. Whatever can bring it crumbling down, which means our response is going to be negative. We're going to hunker down, hide behind a fortress. A fight will ensue in metaphorical or practical terms, and we will never move forward. And the moment you take ego out of the way, then you start thinking differently. And that's exactly what military personnel are trained to do, special forces operatives are trained to do. This is exactly what the top-level athletes are trained to do. The moment they're taking the shot, the whole team, the whole game, everything may hang on that one shot. If they start thinking, it's me, am I good enough? Is it my reputation? What if I fail? What if the game will be lost and nobody will ever hire me? $1 million contracts will be lost. That's it. You've lost that completely. You cannot feel that. So you say, okay, this is great. You're telling me something which I can understand conceptually. How do I actually live that? How do I do it? And this is how you do it. You do it by practicing. You got to think, why did the other person say that? They said something thinking, it hurt me. Why did they say that? Did they want to hurt me? Most likely not. 99.999% of the times, other people who you feel are getting at you aren't. They're expressing their point of view, their perception, their filtering. Why is it? If you can understand that, suddenly you have a connection because you can see their point of view. And suddenly you are also enriched because your own horizons have broadened. Your own soft skill set has become deeper because suddenly you reached out and touched somebody in their mind. And if you can do that, then you can say, well, maybe we can turn this around because I can see what you see. And this is not what I was projecting. This is not what I was trying to say. Now, if we apply this in negotiating, in selling, in whatever we actually do, the results and the outcome are always different.
And let's contrast empathy with sympathy, because I'm not sure globally. I know over here in the United States, we get that mixed up a lot. So how would you differentiate the two?
Sympathy in many ways is, it's expressing a feeling for another person to make them feel better or to soften whatever it is they're feeling. You're not taking the extra step or putting in the effort to feel what they feel, to see things from their perspective. You're just saying, you told me I was in a car crash this morning. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. That's my instant response. This is my expression of sympathy because traditionally this is the human response where you think, okay, David is also sorry. What I'm really feeling is that, okay, you had an accident. I feel a kind of relief because I hadn't had that kind of day. That's also tangled up in this complex psychology that we have as humans. If I was really empathic, if I really felt for you, I'd say, hey, did you get hurt? Are you okay? Did any affect you in any other way? And I'm actually trying to think how complicated it must have been for you. And because of that, I'm not actually thinking what I'm thinking, like, oh, thank God I didn't have that kind of day. I'm actually thinking, God, that was really bad. Is really okay? Trying to walk into your shoes, I forget my perspective. But the connection then becomes really real because it's very human. It's a very human thing to do. I kind of feel what happened to you. And you feel that in my responses because it is very difficult to actually fake. Empathy is really hard to do because it requires effort. It requires in a really massive day or perhaps in a conversation which we started and I have a very specific intent and I'm very focused and very businesslike. You tell me that and you wrong-foot me. And if I refuse to be human, I'll say, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that.
There's a line in my favorite song right now. Well, you know me a long time, so you know I have a ton of favorites of everything. My favorite song right now is called Big Time. It's a local Boulder band, and they are all acoustic. So every sound you hear is coming out of somebody's mouth in the band. One of their lyrics is, there's heaven in the space between us. That's my favorite thing that comes up over and over and over again because it weaves the humanity in. And he's talking about his wife and he's talking about the life they're living and that they're having this great time. And I'm like, but you know what? When we stop and we are really present with each other, there is heaven right there. Whatever that is, that deeper connection, awareness, whatever it might be. And it becomes tangible. Even across the screen, it becomes tangible and you can build on that. And you're creating an experience that you'll be able to draw from at later times in future experiences. Now, when we think of military and training and musicians and Olympic athletes and professional athletes, we think of the stress they put their body through. We think of the rigorous training and we think, we're not quite sure why they want to really do that, but good for them. And so when we talk about that though, and we talk about practicing, you brought it up, practicing in business and practicing these skills that do take effort, we don't have to be worn down. We don't have to do quite the same work on a physical level, yet there is a physical level required because whatever we do here with our bodies and our minds and our hearts is what's going to come out and how strong that is and the perspective that we get. And I was thinking as you were talking about empathy versus sympathy, that we actually add a dimension to what context we have available to us. It's like going from 2D to 3D. Have you seen that at work when you see somebody be able to get that next dimension and the expansion that happens with that? Can you tell us a story or an example of something like that?
Before that, I'm going to, because you mentioned the physical level, and I think this is really important. We forget, we say we have thoughts and ideas and emotions and feelings. Where do they come from? And you ask the average person, they'll say, well, they come right here in my head. They come from me. Or they come in my heart. They're feeling better and a bit more mellow at the end of a Friday night, in the end of the week. And really, everything we think and everything we feel starts from the experiential element of our bodies, our sensations. And the classic example here is I would be willing to bet any money on anyone to drink 1.5 liters of water and go in and sit for 90 minutes to negotiate a tight deal without a bathroom break. It's not going to go their way. I can guarantee you that. Okay, and you say, well, that's that simple thing will actually derail even the highest level of negotiation with the most talented people. Because we're all flesh and blood. If we don't take the trouble to do something physical, which will make us feel good, then it's highly unlikely that we'll be able to have the right kind of mindset when we meet somebody or meet a problem. It's highly unlikely we'll have good feelings for the start of the day, and certainly the willpower necessary to continue smiling throughout a tough day. And we started talking about the military, and we talked about business, and these things are related directly because there are humans in both of them, and they're just ordinary people. They've just been trained to do very specific jobs. In the military now, these days, we tend to look at from a preconceived point of view, that it's a sort of kind of machine made of little cogs, little soldiers. They're told what to do and they do it. And it's not like that, because the military itself actually looks at soldiers through a multi-dimensional approach. They look at the physical side and the psychological side and the emotional side and the skill sets which they bring on a hard level, look at their identity building, they look at the nutrition, and they look at the medical records. And all those things go to make up a soldier, which then, in a compartmentalized way, they begin to work on to create the perfect soldier for the job. We look at the business world, what do we get? Latte and croissant in the morning.
Right.
And that's how the day starts, right?
Uh-huh.
And you think, well, what's the nutritional value of that in relation to what you're expected to do for the rest of the day? So, we have to basically own ourselves in a way that in the business world we haven't become used to owning. And, popular culture has a lot to do with that. We think that it's all cerebral work. It's in our minds, it's in our heads. Well, where does the brain actually reside? Is it in a box or is it inside your head? If it's inside your head, it's fed by your blood supply, which is fed by nutrients, which is linked to the body, and constantly it receives data in the form of sensations. If you're sitting on a bed of nails, it's unlikely you're going to be able to spend an 18-hour day on it, because it's kind of hard.
It depends on which part, I guess. If you're laying down flat, I'm not sure I might be able to build up to that, but if I'm standing on it on my 2 feet, probably not.
Yeah, that's pretty hard, right? So these are the things which we need to actually take into account. As we go from 2D to 3D, as you say, it's the ability to actually expand their sensorium. We live in the moment. You say you have to be present. You meet a person and you're present. Now, it doesn't matter if you do that. It doesn't matter what kind of person you meet. You may meet a panhandler. You may meet the CEO of a massive corporation. I can guarantee you, from a human connection, you're going to come out changed and enriched, because it's impossible to touch upon the universe of another person and not feel that magic. And the only way you don't feel that magic is you put down the front and you go 2D. CEO of so-and-so, oh yeah, hello, here's my card.
Right.
Or, panhandler.
I really don't want, I'm glad that didn't happen to me. I'm so glad you're here now. I hear that.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
And here's the thing. I don't know if we can show empathy all the time. That is something I know I strive to do, and I actively practice empathy on a regular basis, and I still catch myself being sympathetic, thinking they will want to go faster instead of showing up with a curiosity about them and finding out, do they want to fly by that? Do they actually want to process a little more so that real work can be done? Some people want to skip it to get to the real work. Some people need a minute to connect to get to whatever is at hand. And some people, they're like, oh yeah, well, it is what it is. And they come in smiling and they're like, I'm already ahead of that game. I'm glad to be here now. Good, it's all okay. And even the other person is okay. I was really glad about that too. So it's interesting to see how that will show up. And it's in the language we use. So being able to watch the words that we say and listen back to how we're saying different things, replaying those in our head, we have a chance to do a self-check and find out, is the language we're using self-centered? Not that that's bad, just to be aware. And what could we do to change it to deepen our connection with others? I like that you brought up the 8 categories. Can you tell? I'm in my book with all my notes that I have written. Your book has got 2 colors in it, which is really important. Most books I read and I write in only get 1. We've talked about this concept of self-control and positive thinking. That just came up. You were talking about visualization. We were touching on that just briefly. Is visualization a type of filtering system, or do you consider that when you're visualizing something different?
It's not a filtering system. Let's call it a tool set, or one of the tools we use to essentially approach a complex situation. Now, when something is complex, it has a lot of many different levels. So there's not a single thing you can say, oh, this is the key to that complex event or the complex outcome that I want to actually reach. When we begin to enrich ourselves, when we actually begin to take charge of who we are, our identity begins to become very concrete. We learn who we are, so we begin to understand our why. Then in order to get to something, we need to be able to have any kind of approaches. Visualization, the ability to actually visualize an outcome and begin to play it in your head, begin to prepare yourself for that, so you're covering as many eventualities as possible. It's part of the mental training that we undergo. Whether you're a business negotiator, whether you're a planner in a startup, thinking what are the possible outcomes. If I do this, what will happen here? If I want to get there, how do I actually get there? What are the steps? So you begin to create a mental plan. These are important things which allow you to break things down and perhaps see what we call the bigger picture, which then becomes a bigger strategy, which then you begin to actually break down and analyze so you can make better use of. Within that, a sense of self plays a key role. If you're not sure who you are, and you spoke about empathy earlier, and you said it's really difficult to do all the time. I agree. If we do it, if we say, oh, I've got to do empathy now. So immediately, and my energy levels go up, right? Because I need to prepare myself. I need to say, right. Okay, how do you feel today? I've got to think, okay, who you are different gender from me. You have different cultural background. You're in a different country. I'm thinking about all these things. So it's really tiring me out now. And by the time I actually get to, step into your shoes, I'm already exhausted. But it's really hard. Now, if I change that, why would I even try it? The only reason I would try that is if I truly value who you are as a person and what you can give to me through that connection, how you enrich me and change me. In which case, it's not a job. It's not a hard task. It's actually something which will benefit me. And with practice, it becomes part of the way we operate and the way we connect with people. And suddenly, we stop this what I call air kissing. We go, ooh, because we use that as a social connection. No, we actually really connect with the person and say, right. Hey, how are you doing? And we actually are interested in how they're doing instead of expecting another blasé reply from them so we can go on our way.
You said something, and it's going to come back in a quote in our show notes for sure. The people that continue smiling throughout a tough day. Actually, I wrote that down. That was really good. And I bring that up because those people are the ones that are always actively practicing empathy. There are sometimes I'm just like, oh, am I really trying too hard here? And I can see myself going, am I being empathetic here? Which takes me out of the moment of actually being able to be empathetic. And sometimes I just have a bad day. They don't happen often, but they happen. Yeah. And being able to give ourselves grace in those moments and going, right, I'm trying too hard here. What could I do to change? Or I don't have the energy I normally have. And so what can I adjust, or how can I show up to bring in those innate connection points that I know I have, that I know can help me here in this meeting, in this interview, in this sales call, negotiating a contract?
So many things you said. Let's unpack them a little bit. First of all, yeah, we all have bad moments and bad days. And when we do that, what has happened? This is what's happened. Things haven't gone according to our expectations. That has frustrated us. It has brought up our energy levels because now we think we are to blame. We think we're failing. That begins to undermine our self-control. That begins to also undermine our self-confidence. So the next task we do is again, begin to go a little bit beyond this because we're not as capable as before, and it sort of goes from there. How many times have you heard data starts out badly, continues badly for a reason, right? Because that's exactly what happens. Because the first thing, practically almost killed you, you pulled yourself up, and now the whole day's ahead of you, and you got to climb 1,000 feet up into the cliff face. You can't do it. You think this is really difficult. You're going to trip up and fall. It's guaranteed. How do we turn that around?
We don't even have to go that big. I had a really hard Monday yesterday. and it was around wet snow pants and warm enough clothes to send my child to school. And we found it out as we're loading up the car. And I'm like, okay. So you have a choice in that moment, don't you? You have a choice to go, I'm going to get angry. I'm going to fall down. And in your example, I might die. So what do you do?
Yeah. The first thing you do is you actually got to smile. And because the moment you smile, this is what happens, okay? Whether you mean the smile or not, it really does matter. Because in order for your body to smile, your brain has to release very specific hormones. And they dampen down your stress levels. So the moment you smile, suddenly the stress levels drop. And the moment the stress levels drop, cortisol, which is a stress hormone in your body, begins to get reduced. And when that happens, your executive decision-making centers of the brain, the higher centers of the brain which actually make executive decisions, come back online because they've been shut down. So suddenly, you feel the pressure coming off you, and actually you see more things which are potentially available to you, which you hadn't seen before, looking at the same facts. So you think, well, why couldn't I have seen it earlier? Well, you couldn't have seen it earlier because you felt stressed. And when you felt stressed, your body goes into automatic processes which have been, through the ages, been designed to help us survive outcomes with Tyrannosaurus rexes, which have big teeth and big mass, and you haven't got a lot of time to actually negotiate with them. And you don't need to have higher executive functions. What you need to do is reactions. But reactions in a complex world of today are usually wrong. And a person who reacts to things they don't control, so they have zero control of the situation, which means you have zero control of yourself. You have zero control of your reactions, and you're going to do things you're going to regret. You're going to make the wrong choice, which will lead to the wrong decisions, which will lead to the wrong actions, and there's no way in hell that you're going to get the outcome you expect. It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And are you listening, everybody? Rewind after this show and listen again. It's not going to happen the way you think it is when you go down that path. Hey, David, we actually have a question from Facebook for you. And Pierre Provost has asked, I'm in the process of starting an online business. Which sniper skill do you recommend I focus on first?
The one you will need the most right now is self-confidence. So you need to feel completely capable of doing what you intend to do. And that will allow you to move forward with greater control of the variables which are in front of you and greater control of the variables which you haven't foreseen which will come up.
And when we have that confidence, how do we make sure it doesn't turn into our 6-foot EGOs?
Well, the easiest thing on that is to practice empathy, because the moment you practice empathy, ego goes. You realize that individually, we're very small, the world is very big, our plans mean nothing, complexity overwhelms us, and the only way we can function is by actually linking up to other people and serving them and feeling part of a larger thing than ourselves. So if I, for instance, wrote a book which I wanted to write simply because I want to write it. It doesn't matter how clever I am, it doesn't matter how brilliant the writing or magnificent the research or fantastic the cover, meets zero needs. Nobody wants it. Nobody wants to read it because they don't have the need for that, right? So then all that massive talent, energy, whatever you want to call it, which would be feeding my ego, is for nothing. It's zero. So nothing happens. But if I say, in every book I write is there to actually answer a specific question, how do I do this? Or why should this be done? So if I'm answering that question, I've actually thought really deeply about the needs of other people. I try to walk in their shoes, see things from their eyes. I have felt their uncertainty. And in doing the work which I've done, I've tried to answer the questions they need answering in order for them to actually do something. And that's what actually gives value to what I do. And that's what takes my ego out of the way, because it doesn't matter how brilliantly I do it or not. If it doesn't connect, it's not going to be of any use to anybody.
Just being around people and observing those people and recognizing my space that I take up and your space that you take up and anybody else who is a fly on the wall in this case, or actually with us, like Eva and Scott are here with us, and how all of those things are impacting what we do. It comes back to our own personal awareness. If I wanted to build my personal awareness, you mention mindfulness a lot. I know that there's a big link between self-awareness and mindfulness practice. And so how do you see those two things, and especially the mindfulness piece, showing up in business today?
The mindfulness bit comes in the pride you take in what you do. And if you take real pride in what you do, nothing is ever too much. Because what really matters is not to get it done and get an outcome, i.e. a sale or a connection or exchange of business cards or a signed contract. It's the process and the connection with the person, the fact that you actually help them, that's really important. That's pride in your work, pride in that process. It's a very human thing. And because of that, we tend to focus and take pleasure in the moment in what we do. And then the outcome, of course, is usually what we want to get, because that's where things head. Self-awareness is your ability to actually understand why you do things. It's where you constantly analyze, why do I do this? Why did I get up this morning? Why did I get out of bed? And if you say, well, because I need to make a living. Yes, we all do that. There's no way that, we're going to stay in bed and make a living. But if that's all there is to it, then you're like a machine. You're an automaton. There's nothing driving you beyond the need to eat. And the moment you have enough to eat, lunchtime you stop. You had 3 sandwiches for the day, that's enough. I'm going to come back tomorrow and see if I can get 3 more. We don't work like that. We work for something which is very human, and we have to feel that our individual efforts, little as they are, small as they are contributing to something greater. And that greater doesn't have to be the building of a great edifice or a massive corporation being put together or taking over the world. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. It can be the fact that, by connecting with other people, you're reaffirming that this world is actually worth living in. And I think that's a brilliant way to see it, because you try to make it better. You try to be helpful. They will try to be helpful back. That's a fantastic way of going on. And then if we can all do that, suddenly it feels like a much better place, a much better day, much better way of doing things. We feel good while we're doing it, and we usually earn a living in the process.
Isn't that amazing? And take what we know we need to be done, yet put the element of what can we do here? What can we show up with? What do we get to bring to the table that we are? And I love that you say that we're proud of, because we forget. And that's actually one of the things I'm taking away from your book. And of course, this is from my experience and how I look at the world and all my views. Yet there's an element of putting that aside or carrying it with me in a backpack instead of actually saying, yeah, here, this is actually part of what I can bring to the table, and great, amazing things come out of it when we spend the time, just like you do, just like Scott does, just like Eva does, just like Pierre does. I think that that's a huge piece when we think about mindfulness. So one thing I didn't hear you say was meditate. And I know that's a part of it.
We can, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, we can definitely meditate. But meditation, there are many paths to mindfulness. You can do your favorite activity, whatever that is. You can chew gum, draw, listen to music, play Skittles, doodle on your computer, whatever. And if it's something you love, at some point your mind just wanders away. Mm-hmm. You are in the moment, if everything feels great. You're not conscious of yourself, but you are aware that you're there. You're not conscious of the world, but you're part of it, and it feels fantastic. Now, that is mindfulness. Sure, you can meditate, you can chant, you can play with balls and ring bells, or do whatever you think will actually get you there. But the thing is that the moment you're there, it feels amazing. And we can all get there by different things. So that's why I didn't say meditate as a matter of course. You don't have to.
That's good. And one of the things I find, and sure, I meditate some, and sure, I take walks some, and sure, I have the activities that I do that I just lose time because they're so fun to do. And just doing them takes my mind off of things. Those, when we're intentional about them, we can actually call those back. What I hear you saying is whatever form we might be using, we get to call on that, and we actually get to understand and bring that mindfulness without going and spending an hour or even 10 minutes doing something else to find it and embody it. So when we've got it, reflect back and go, okay, this is what that felt like. And how can I, in a breath, and you talk about 100 breaths a lot in this book. And I was like, I don't know if I can do 100 breaths, but I can do 3 and I can get close. So, but it's interesting, right? To be able to, I call it stop, look, and listen. And you use, what are your 3? It's stop, feel, and breathe.
But if you do that, I mean, if you do these things, and these are all physical things, right? I mean, we actually using the body, because our brain, our mind is embodied in a physical form, right? So we're actually, we don't separate it, and we can't separate them. We shouldn't separate them. So the moment we realize that, then we begin to see ourselves a little bit differently. So if we're having a bad day, and you think, okay, why? Am I sweating? Am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I sitting wrongly? Am I sore from last night's game of tennis? Whatever it is. So you analyze that. The moment you analyze that, you begin to sort of get rid of the ego thing, and you begin to see yourself in a different light. You begin to become a bit more empathetic. And you say, oh, I'm snapping at people because it's near lunchtime. I'm really hungry. My blood sugar is low. The moment you say that, you stop taking yourself too seriously. So we take our work very seriously, but we should never take ourselves too seriously. So that changes your perspective. Then you sort of think, oh, somebody says something, so it's near lunchtime now. If I think about this, I'm probably going to blow up, and you'll never talk to me again. So let's go and get a sandwich first, and come back and look at it. Mm-hmm. So then you begin to manage yourself properly, very strategically. You begin to analyze your own resources. If you can do this for yourself, you can do this for the immediate environment around you. And if you can do that for that immediate environment, then you're capable of strategic thought in a greater sense. So then you say, okay, what's the grand plan? The grand plan is to take over the North American market. Great. What do we need for that? What are the obstacles? What are the resources? Who's going to do what? How do we know? How do we test? Then suddenly everything becomes very modularized, if you like. And that's how the military operates, right? They run this 10,000 men campaign across terrain they never met before, with obstacles they can't even predict, with sorts of variables that will happen on a day. And then they still do it. You think, how is it possible for them to do that and still get to the outcome they want? Well, this is how they do it. First of all, they train their people very well. Then they trust their people exceedingly well. Then they empower them to make decisions. Then they compartmentalize everything. And then they teach everybody else to compartmentalize things. And the moment you compartmentalize and start analyzing little modules, you begin to say, okay, this is what I need to do here. This is what I need to do there. This is where I'll see there. And what's the benefit of this? Everybody's got strategic thought, which means suddenly you have this syncing going on between, let's say, the people sitting in one side of the continent, 1,000 miles away, and the people on the other side of the continent doing something entirely different, and they're all thinking the same thing. They're on the same page. You replicate that in your business, whether you're a 3-man team or a 30,000 strong workforce, you become unstoppable. And that's the real magic, right? It's humanity doing things together. I always quote on presentation Caesar, not the Roman emperor, the monkey. What does he say? Stronger together. I believe in that. I think that's exactly right.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are here, and can you tell? Do you understand why I like having David on the show with me and coming to talk? Because we have a great time. The time flies by, and I don't want it to end. Unfortunately, we must end it today for all of you, for David. And so come back next time. And I know he'll come back. We talk to him every year or so, which is fantastic. And we are very appreciative of that. So thank you, David. You're going to find all of the program notes for Make Better Decisions at voiceofboldbusiness.com. And this is program 119. So the URL is voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 119. You can also search Make Better Decisions. You can email radio@reddirection.com and tell us what you think, what you want to hear, what you thought. We'll make sure and pass anything you have for David on to David. And he's on social media too. I mean, this guy has not only written a ton of books that are worth reading, even the ones that he wrote, 10 years ago now, David? I mean, they're all useful. They all have elements that can be used today. Go look him up on social media. Plus, we're going to link to his books as well as his social media profiles on the voiceofboldbusiness.com. We want to get you to him so that you can get your questions answered and pull the information that you need. Make a connection, and don't forget to be empathetic and thoughtful and set that ego aside. So until next time, you are the one that defines what it means to be a leader today, what it means for effectiveness, what it means to do what you need to do. And it's through your stories and the talking of those stories, like what we're doing on this program, that define it, that help you do what you want to do, when you want to do it, in the moment that whatever that is, needs to be done. So we want to know, how do you incorporate these concepts to make better decisions?
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.